All right. Good morning, Ethan. Welcome back to another DSLayered podcast episode. How are you this morning?
Good. Yeah, it's a little later
This
here.
evening, sorry.
but yeah, good morning.
And I just heard you got some snow.
Indeed, we've got last time I was outside, which was about an hour ago, we had about an inch of snow on the ground. Do you use inches over there? Not really. 2.5 centimeters.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Awesome. So we're here today to record another Bob J for the BW for the Bob J community episode. And this is episode 5, and so we've achieved quite a lot thanks to mainly in part to Ethan. What we've done is we've taken a BW system, a business object system, a data services system, and what we've been able to demonstrate over the last several episodes is taking some SQL Server data, loading that into BW via data services into a PSA, and Ethan picked me up on my terminology here, but I'm starting to get better at this. So into the PSA,
Exactly.
Where we then created a DSO on top of that with mapped info objects against that DSO, which we then exposed through a BEX query, which we then connected the business objects tools to.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get it right?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a multi-provider in there somewhere, but we'll...
Yeah, right, I forgot that one. So what we've been able to demonstrate is effectively that even if you don't have SAP ERP in your system landscape, the business objects and SAP BI tools do work together in that you can actually take data from a non-SAP data source, load it into BW, and use the BW functionality to provide the platform for an enterprise data warehouse, which you can then expose and consume through business objects.
Yeah.
We haven't really got the enterprise data warehouse part nailed yet, but that's coming, right? So
yeah, so I mean, hopefully we have shown enough, and we are in this episode and the next episode. Hopefully, we're showing enough so that business objects people can start to feel a little bit more comfortable in using BW as the kind of data mart services for business objects data services and business objects BI as an alternative to potentially to another database, and providing a few more data warehousey, data marty services, kind of natively as from BW, as opposed to building them on top of another database, either using data services or universes. So in some scenarios, that'll definitely be easier, especially if BW is already set up at a client where business objects is also being used. And hopefully we're starting to see a little bit how BW can really help pull things together in a data warehouse scenario as well. But we're not going to totally get to a complete data warehouse approach, but hopefully the pieces are there.
awesome. So last episode we had made some improvements in the background to our BEX query, and then we stuck business objects on top, and we're able to use Web Intelligence, Crystal Reports, Excel sheets, and so on top of that BEX query. What we wanted to do in this episode was take a step back, and Ethan's going to walk us through what those improvements were to the BEX query and why that was so important. So over to you, Ethan. Thanks.
All right. So I'm going to go straight to screen share, and we'll start walking through things. There are basically 4 pieces that I want to take a look at today. Things that I did last time, and things that we can do today to make the query a little bit nicer, the query that we've been working on. Just to kind of remind everybody what things looked like yesterday. This is the BEX view, but we also had pretty much the same thing in the business objects view. And there are some good things about this query, but there are some problems. We pulled in navigational attributes into the query so that we can do navigation, drill down, or filtering on attributes of things that are in the data provider, in this case the DSO. So we can look at attributes of order or product, and we'll show how that works. We added a hierarchy on city. So if we pull in city here, we can see that there's a hierarchy, and I'll show how I did that and how people can just manually build hierarchies in BW. And then we also want to fix this little problem we've got with the unit of measure here, where it always shows error next to the number for net sales, for example. So we'll do those 4 things. So let's jump right in. Let's start out with the hierarchy, because that's pretty straightforward. You can actually build hierarchies in an automated fashion in BW, but in this case, I'm just doing it manually. The automated way is pretty complicated if you don't have things in exactly the right format to start out with. And so there is some documentation on that, but I think that's something that should be handled as a separate discussion. But what I did was just manually build the hierarchy, and in order to do that, let me go backwards a little bit. We can, in our info provider view or in our info object view in RSA1 that we've seen before, we can go into the info object, in this case city, and as long as that info object has been configured to have hierarchies by just checking off this with hierarchies checkbox, we can maintain those hierarchies. So we can either do that by clicking maintain hierarchies here, or we can right click on the info object and do it. I've got one hierarchy called geography, and we can just double click on that and then click the edit button. And this hierarchy is a little bit more complicated than usual because I've defined it to have characteristic nodes. And so when I configured the hierarchy before in the info object, I said that it's a hierarchy made up of cities, countries, and regions. And then all I did was I just pulled in, just use the little buttons up here for text node, characteristic node, and city to kind of manually build the hierarchy. So I can choose characteristic node. I choose which type of characteristic I want. In this case, I want to build a new region. I choose the region I want to build. Let's add Latin America. It puts it in the wrong place, so we pull it out. Come on, you can do it. This is the problem with building hierarchies, that as always in BW, things are not very simple. So it's going to be difficult to get Latin America out of here. So what I'm going to do is actually just delete it and recreate it. Come on, delete. We'll do this slightly differently and hope that it'll work a little bit better. Region, region, Latin America. There we go. And then we can insert another characteristic under that, but in this case it'll be a country. And we find one of our countries that's in Latin America, Brazil, and we can do another one. And Colombia is also in there. Or actually, I've got this wrong, don't I? But that just shows my geography skills. So I think we actually have South America as well, don't we? Oh, no, I guess they've got it all under Latin America. Lucky me. And then in Brazil, we can choose a city. Lucky me. And Brasilia is the capital city of Brazil. And so we'll just stop there, save and activate the hierarchy again. But this is how you manually build a hierarchy in BW. And for geographic hierarchies, that's usually the best idea since they don't change very often. And they're not extremely large and complicated. So you don't generally have to build them programmatically. You just
How does it handle changes in the hierarchy over time?
Yeah, so if you want to do so BW supports time dependency on a lot of things, but specifically on hierarchies and on navigational attributes. And in the case of hierarchies, there's support for several different kinds of time dependency. So we can look at down here our hierarchy properties in the hierarchy tab of the info object. And we can choose, first of all, we can choose whether hierarchies are version dependent, and that lets us define different versions of different hierarchies. So we can have a variable for a version, like a plan or an actual hierarchy. So what I just did there was actually use the secret BW F1 help. So you can always select almost anything in BW. In this case, you can see these little red I don't know, Josh, can you see the little red things here around hierarchy version dependent? And then you click F1, and you get a little explanation of what this option does. And in this case, hierarchies can have several versions. And you can have a variable. There's a special variable for choosing a hierarchy version. So when you run a report, you can choose which version of the hierarchy you want. And then you can choose time dependency. So you can choose the hierarchy is not time dependent at all. You can say the entire hierarchy is time dependent, which means that there's an entire hierarchy that's valid from a year ago until today, and then there's a whole other hierarchy that's valid from today until a year from now. And then you can have a time-dependent hierarchy structure, which means that each node of the hierarchy, the children it has is a time-dependent structure. And this means that you can actually have a hierarchy that kind of morphs over time, and then depending on your reporting date, you get a different hierarchy. You can set it to use a temporal hierarchy join. This is a complex kind of idea, and it used to, in some scenarios that actually improves performance. In some scenarios it kills performance. So if you're going to try to use that, read up on it. In general, I would stick with the first two options here, either not time dependent or the entire hierarchy is time dependent. There are not that many scenarios in which a time dependent hierarchy structure is really necessary. Hierarchies also permit intervals, so you can have a hierarchy node that says, like, it doesn't really work for cities, but if you have like a special naming convention for accounts or something like that, you can have a node that contains all the accounts from account 9996 to 9999. And then you can, for an individual node, you can also reverse plus or minus signs. So by choosing these different options, it gives you some more options when you're building the hierarchy. Then when you maintain the hierarchy, if you have time dependency turned on, you'll have the option to choose a valid from and a valid to date. Because time dependency isn't turned on for this hierarchy, we just have an automatically defaulted valid to date of December 31st, 9999. So that's how it works for hierarchies. It works slightly differently for navigational attributes, and we'll look at that in a second. I think that pretty much explains everything here. One more thing is the place I define those characteristics that I could choose for the hierarchy is here with this button, External Characteristics and Hierarchies. And you just choose the characteristics that are part of your hierarchy here. Okay. So enough of hierarchies. We'll see the changes I made when we go back into the query. Let's hop over to navigational attributes. So I turned on some navigational attributes for our last episode. Specifically, I turned on city as a navigational attribute of customer, and I turned on employee and shipper as navigational attributes of order, as well as category as a navigational attribute of product.
So you can what does that give us, I guess, from if you don't have it to what you do have?
Yep. So what we can do in queries, if I fire up Query Designer, but I think we also remember from Webby, all of these things, order, product, customer, they have attributes, and we can use those for display purposes. So for example, we could display city before I added it as a navigational attribute, but what we couldn't do was drill down on city. So we could have we could drill down on customer and then display city in a separate column, but we couldn't have a drill down on city without having customer in there. So what we have now is city from customer, which I've renamed, and I'll show how to do that to make these navigational attributes a little bit prettier. And we have a drill down on it all by itself. So that's what navigational attributes give you in BW. It also allows you to filter based on that in a way that you can't do with attributes. So it's sort of like, I mean, it is actually just a join. When you turn on when you turn on the navigational attribute of a dimension, you're telling the system to join that attribute onto the star schema. So you get what is in BW called an extended star schema with multiple levels of joins.
Okay.
So let's go through how that works. It's very simple to turn these on. There's not much of a performance impact, and with HANA, there's even less of one. So I wanted to turn on some navigational attributes of customer. So all I do then is go to the customer info object. I'm going to put it into change mode really quickly, but it's not necessary to show. And then you can see the three attributes I've turned into navigational attributes. Only one of them is enabled in the query, but city, region, and country have all been made navigational attributes. The way you control that is by this little checkbox here in the navigation attribute on or off column. So if, for example, I wanted to make company name a navigational attribute, I could turn that on. The type of the attribute here would switch from display, DIS, to navigational, NAV. And then I can give it a nice text. So I can say company name from customer. Usually you want to actually use the technical name of customer here, so you'd say from Z customer. But it depends how you're structuring your kind of semantic representation to users. So this is what people will actually see in Bex or in Webby when this pops up as something that they can drill down on or filter on. It's just warning me that the navigational attribute was switched on and that this can change data structures and query structures. And sometimes BW does this. It's completely unclear why. All right, error in activating info objects. Whoopee. Said tables cannot be filled. So I think we're going to have to clear it out before we can do that. So I'm going to back out here, and we'll just leave it as it was. Change attributes, undo that. Let's try this again. All right, we're safe. So we shouldn't have had to unload the master data from this info object in order to turn on the navigational attributes. I didn't do that last time I did this, but there's something special about company name that's different than the other ones. And so for some reason we're not allowed to change it. Such is life. That's the devil of the demo. So theoretically, as happened with city, region, and country, we could just turn that on and it would show up in Bex Query Designer as available. Oh, no, it doesn't quite. Once we turn those on, actually, let me demonstrate on employee that we can just change that name. If I remember correctly, we had one from order and product. So I need Z order, employee, shipper, and shipper. Okay. So we're going to fix the order and product navigational attributes so that they look prettier. Just going to change the name of them. So this is customer from order. This is employee from order. And this is shipper from order. Let's just save that off. Activate. That's much better. So it's happier with that. But I didn't, of course, try to change too much. And then in product, we want to play with that briefly and change. So this is category from product. Good. All right. So the last part of turning on these navigational attributes, we turn it on in the info object, and then it's available in all info providers where that info object exists. But it's not necessarily active. So there is a performance impact from using a navigational attribute in an info provider. It's not as fast as just having it directly in the data fields in the DSO, for example. The same goes for info cubes. It's not as fast as having the info object directly in the star schema. You've got another join to add in that attribute. So an info cube is a fact table, a bunch of dimension tables, and then it's got links into some of the info object attribute tables. So in BW we call dimension tables. Dimension tables don't mean tables that are representative of master data. It means a kind of intermediary table that's groupings of master data that make sense in the star schema. So the master data is not completely joined in the same way, but with a navigational attribute, you actually have another join on top of the fact table, dimension table join to join in the attributes from the master data. So it definitely has a performance impact.
So like a snowflake structure?
That's exactly what it is. It's a traditional snowflake structure. So when you turn on navigational attributes, you're going from a fairly traditional star schema to a snowflake structure. And because of that, you don't always want to have them turned on. You only want to have them turned on if they're useful. So in the info provider edit view, we've got a folder for navigational attributes, and then we can see all the navigational attributes that are available from the info objects in our key fields and data fields. But they're not on by default, they're off by default. So if we want them to be turned on, we have to check this box here in the right column.
Not seeing it yet. Sorry. You might need to talk again so it goes back to you.
So if you can see the BW system, and then you should see the DSO edit view, and then there's a list of navigational attributes. Or is that not coming up?
Oh, I see it now, yeah.
Okay, good. So there's this column here for on, off, and it's just a checkbox. And by default, that's unchecked. It's off. And if you want to make a navigational attribute available for reporting purposes, then you need to check that box in the info provider. And so that's an info provider specific setting. So that's what I did last time to make these available. And you can see that we've got city available, employee, shipper category, and I haven't made country or region available because those should be available in the hierarchy of city. So there's a different way to get at those. So for navigational attributes, I wanted to show one more thing, which is that there's the option to make them time dependent. So these three attributes, I'm looking at customer again, and Josh, is it coming through? Can you see this?
Not yet. Might be a bit of a lag.
Yeah, it seems so.
There you go.
All right, great. So we're looking at the customer info object again, and again, there are these three attributes that I've made navigational attributes. And when you make an attribute navigational, you can, if you want, oops, where'd it go? Yeah, here it is. So you can always make attributes time dependent. If I can pull this open, there we go. So in order to make an attribute time dependent, you can check this time dependency box. When you do that, if depending on how you set up the attribute, you can. Oh, sorry, no, it's always like that. What am I thinking? I need to start using the F1 help. So if you make an attribute time dependent, then you can load in attributes, and when you load them, it'll have you'll give a start date and an end date in the master data. And so this makes it so that you can have attributes that change over time, or what's called sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly changing dimensions. So usually, so if a customer moves, for example, you could get that. But this is often a lot more useful for things like brands or product categories or that kind of thing. And what BW actually allows here is there are really three, well actually four, but three kind of comprehensible ways of modeling time-dependent data. So you have three ways of doing things, of setting things up. You can either put an info object field directly into the info provider, so you can put it into the DSO. And this is the modeling technique that gives you the value at the time of the load, of the data load. Another option is you can have it modeled as a navigational attribute, like the way we have city set up as a navigational attribute in this DSO, and that gives you the structure, the reporting structure at the time of reporting. So every time you do the report, it looks up what the city is for that customer at that time. And since there's no time dependency, there's no historical view. It's just however it is now, however the master data is now. And the third way is that you can do reporting at kind of an arbitrary time structure. And in order to do that, you use the time dependency option for attributes or for navigational attributes. So you set something up as a navigational attribute or as an attribute if you're just using that. If you're just using it for display purposes, you can just have it as an attribute. But if you're using it for navigational purposes, for filters, drill downs, you set it up as a navigational attribute with time dependency. And then when you run the query, you give a key date. And then whatever key date you use, it will look up whatever was the valid city for this customer at that date. So if a customer moved around from one region to another, for example, you could look at your data as if it were 2005 instead of 2012. So you can kind of regroup things depending on what date you use as your key date in the query. So this can be pretty useful for kind of comparative reporting, because sometimes you'll want to do a report of, so like if you do performance reporting by region, for example, and some customers moved around, you may want to look at your performance as if it were 2005, and then look at it again as if it were 2012 and see what the difference is. So that kind of thing can be somewhat useful. It's a more advanced topic, right? And it's pretty familiar with people who are familiar with data warehousing, but it's definitely something that's pretty easy to do in BW, and it's done in a very consistent way. So that can be pretty helpful. I don't know. Was that clear at all, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. So we fixed the navigational attributes so that they look a little prettier. The last thing I wanted to address was this issue we've got with this error we're getting for units of measure. So the reason for that is that we're not populating units of measure when we load the order details DSO. And I wanted to fix our transformation so that we populate that. Now, we don't have a unit of measure coming from the source system, so my assumption is that this is all coming in a single currency and single unit of measure quantity. So what I'm going to do is just use the functionality of VW transformations to just set a constant for the currency. Can you see what I'm doing here or not?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we pop up the zero currency rule in the transformation. We choose rule type constant, and then we're going to choose a constant value for the currency. What do you think, Josh? Should we use Australian dollars or US dollars?
It's actually the server's in Singapore, so it could be Singapore.
Oh, it's in Singapore. Okay, so what's the abbreviation for that?
SGD.
SGD. Perfect. So we'll make it Singapore dollars, and our unit is going to be, hopefully the system knows what Singapore dollars are. I'm pretty sure it will, but I haven't tested that one. And our unit's going to be in each. And we'll just leave it like that. Save, activate. We're going to delete our data and then rerun our DTP, and then we'll pray that it works. So we'll delete all the data from the DSO.
So you should never ask for questions from the audience about what you should do in your demo.
Yeah, right.
That's going to break. And
only do what you've tested before.
Yeah.
Well, if it doesn't work, we can always go back to something tried and true. All right. Activate. and execute. Looks pretty good. And the whole thing's green, yeah. The whole thing's green, and then we just need to activate the data in the DSO. So I don't think I really explained last time what DSOs are doing and why we need to activate this data. And a DSO is really a three-table structure. It's got an active table, a changelog table, and a new data table. And when you load data to a DSO, it loads into the new data table. And a DSO is really an overwrite structure, an overwrite table structure. So it looks like a single table, but it also, in its changelog, keeps track of all the changes. So you load things into a new table, and then the activation process is the process of reading out what's in the new table, comparing it to what's in the active table, calculating the difference, writing that difference into the changelog table, and then updating the active table with the new data. So in an RDBMS, in a normal relational database system, that structure is set up as, always close your email before you before you start a podcast. That structure is set up as three tables. But interestingly, in a HANA system, so BW is very abstracted from the database layer. And when you migrate to a HANA structured DSO, it's really pretty much only one table. And when you load into the active table, HANA is an append-only an append-only columnar structure. And so what it does is it just adds in the new records with an overwrite, basically. And then because HANA keeps versions of everything that it had before, and with its great compression, it doesn't really cost much space. There's the ability to actually create what is called a calculation view to figure out what the changes were. And so your changelog table is then the calculation view. So activation is actually much faster because activation doesn't really even do anything. It just sets a flag that says we're done loading this particular request, so you can actually look at these records now. So it's pretty cool. And from the perspective of BW, it works exactly the same. There's really no change. So hopefully if we close this query and reopen it, we'll see that we've fixed everything. So this is the moment of truth. And then if this works, we'll hop into Webby and just demonstrate that we can see the changes there as well. What just happened there is perfectly normal. Don't panic. Specs always go to the background when it decides to refresh itself. And things are looking okay, but we're still not getting the names of the info objects here, and I think that's because we've got a info object cache as part of Bex itself. So I need to close the whole thing and reopen it. So I think the same thing is probably going to happen when we do this in Webby. We're not going to get some of the, because I've already got Webby open, we're probably not going to get some of the metadata refreshing properly. So be warned. And I mean, always, of course, when you make changes, you've got to get a feel for, in BW or in anything, you've got to get a feel for how these refreshes happen, because there are caches all over the place, and just don't trust the system, I would say, if you're learning it. If you change something and you think that it should have changed and it looks like it's just not changing, close everything, open everything, and see if it actually changed or not. Eventually you'll get very comfortable with it and have a little easier time. All right, how are we doing? That's much better. So now we see shipper from order, employee from order, and city from customer, and category from product. So BW by default orders things on alphabetically, and there's not really much of a way to override that. So in a lot of places, what you'll do is you'll have the name of the info object first, and then a colon, and then the name of the info object that is the navigational attribute is from first. So we'd have product first, then a colon, and then category. And that way, all the navigational attributes from product get grouped together. But it really depends on how you want to design your system. And we can see that our Singapore dollars are showing up here, and our eaches are showing up. So no more errors there. And again, we can change the properties here so that we don't display. No, we have to do it in Bex itself actually, so that you don't display the currency, but usually you'll want to. So that's pretty good, and let's just swap this out with city really quickly and verify that our hierarchy is in place. And it is not. Something's up. So, I don't know. No, I probably didn't activate it. Let's just check on this on our city hierarchy quickly. Do we have time for this, Josh, or should we hop into Webby and show it there?
Maybe hop into Webby. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Let's do that then. The hierarchy worked before. It doesn't work anymore. Welcome to working with BW. It's easy to build a hierarchy.
Confidence in people everywhere.
Yeah, well, I think we've seen this in some of the other applications as well. But working with this stuff definitely can be difficult. So you've got to get a handle on the quirks, and frankly, this is a version of BW that I haven't been working with much. So this is the newest version, and I'm much more familiar with the 7.0 version, which is the same basic idea, the same kernel really. Yeah, we've been logged out too long, so let's just reload everything. But there's a lot of new functionality in 7.3, and a lot of things have been rewritten. And part of that is to take advantage of HANA, but some things just work a little bit differently. So I have yet to become completely familiar with the quirks of the new BW. All right. So we're firing up Web Intelligence, and we'll just create a new query. And all the changes that we made should just come through. So we already have this query linked up from last time in BusinessObjects, and we'll load it up. And we see the changes we made here coming through: category from product, employee from order. We do have our hierarchy here, but we have the same issue here. So I'm not sure what happened there, but BW is not happy with me with that hierarchy. So we will not drill down on the hierarchy, but we may drill down on the city itself. Oh, yeah, I think we can do text, and then you may have to guide me a little bit here, Josh. City, and we want some kind of, we want like quantity, right? Formatted value, and we can pull in the unit as well. We should get our SGDs, and we want our net sales. Oh, sorry, the quantity unit is eaches. Net sales currency is going to be SGDs. And then we run the query, correct? All right.
Yep.
There's no estimated wait time because God knows how long it'll take. And so our cities just aren't showing up because there's something wrong with that thing. So we would have to go back into design mode, or perhaps I can do it here, but I just don't know how, and choose a different something.
Yeah, you have to go to data access and edit.
Data access, edit. So let's just pull that out and then put our product in, because we know that works. And run query. And this should take a little bit longer because product has a bigger drill down. Apparently more than a little bit longer. And then apparently we need to refresh the whole thing. What's going on? Well,
you drag product into the table because it's not there. So
no, it's not there, is it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, drag and drop's not working like last time. So there we go. We got it. And yeah, so things should be a little bit prettier now, and you can see that comes through because this is using the OLAP connection that we talked about last time and not the universe connection. The semantic changes we make on the BW side are very important on the business object side. So we need those to come. We need those to really have it be usable and nice looking on the business object side. So yeah, I think that's about it for today. And yeah, thanks for going through that with me quickly.
Thanks everyone for watching. So just a really quick recap, we covered, or Ethan covered, setting up hierarchies, navigational attributes, the time dependency of those, the unit of measure. We saw that sometimes hierarchies don't work as easily as they should, and there's something there that we need to fix up, but that's okay, because we walked through the process of setting them up. So yeah, join us next time, and we'll start to explore bringing in a second data source and how we're going to join that up, and some of the other features of BW that enable that to happen much more efficiently. So thanks again, Ethan, for your time, as always.
Thanks, Josh.
Take care. Bye.
This podcast is hosted and sponsored by EV Technologies. Visit us on the net at SaveTheCMS.com. DSLayered!